Look around this room. Look at the person next to you. Think about the weight you carried here today, the bill hidden in your drawer, the eviction notice you're fighting, the medical diagnosis that keeps you up at night, the fear for your child's future in a world that feels like it's closing in. Now, I want you to recall the advice we so often hear: don't get so worked up. Keep politics out of it. Don't take things so personally. What if that advice is the very trap that's been holding us down? What if the most powerful thing we can do, the most radical, transformative, and necessary act is to finally, defiantly take it personally? Today, we are going to dismantle a lie. We are going to follow the trail of our private anxieties and our personal pain, and we will discover where it truly leads, not to our own failure, but to the doorstep of a system that has been designed to make us feel alone and powerless. But we are not alone, and we are far from powerless. Stick with me until the end, because by the time we are done, you will never see your own story the same way again. And you will understand exactly how to turn your private struggle into our collective power. The notion that our personal lives are a realm separate from the grand theater of politics is one of the most pervasive and powerful myths upholding the status quo. It is a deliberate construct that encourages us to see the struggles we face in our daily lives, the difficulty of making rent, the anxiety of a medical diagnosis without insurance, the crumbling ceilings of our children's schools, as isolated personal challenges rather than the direct outcomes of political choices. This artificial division is a tool of political quietism, designed to individualize systemic failure. When we internalize this lie, we are led to believe that our hardships are a reflection of our own inadequacy, a lack of hard work, poor financial planning, or simply bad luck. This framing absolves the systems and the people who design them of any responsibility, turning public failures into private shames. In reality, there is no brick wall separating the world of policy from the world of our lived experience. Politics is the mechanism through which we as a society distribute resources and power. It determines who has access to health care and who is left to suffer. It decides which neighborhoods get investment and which get neglected. It shapes the economic landscape that dictates whether a job pays a living wage. The decision to fund or defund public housing is a political act that manifests as a family's eviction. The choice to prioritize pharmaceutical profits over price controls is a political act that materializes as an unaffordable prescription in a mother's hand. These are not abstract ideological debates. They're concrete forces that structure the boundaries of our existence, dictating the possibilities and limitations of our lives, from our most vulnerable moments to our greatest aspirations. To claim that politics is not personal is to ignore the very architecture of our reality, an architecture built by laws, budgets, and the deliberate priorities of those in power. Recognizing this truth is the first essential step toward transforming our private grievances into a collective demand for a world where our personal lives are not a constant battle against systems designed to fail us, but are instead supported by a foundation of justice and collective care. The abstraction of politics shatters the moment a policy ceases to be a distant concept and becomes a visceral personal event. This is the point where the theoretical becomes a tangible force that inflicts direct harm, transforming a citizen from an observer of the political process into a victim of its outcomes. This keynote moves beyond the general understanding that politics affects our lives and focuses on the specific catalytic moment of impact. It is the difference between reading a news article about education budget cuts and sitting in your child's overcrowded classroom, watching their potential be stifled by a lack of resources. It is the chasm between hearing a statistic on housing insecurity and holding the pink eviction notice that declares your family homeless. In these moments, policy is no longer debated. It is felt. It is a wound, an assault, a concrete manifestation of a power that has decided your hardship is an acceptable cost for a broader political or economic goal. This personalization of policy is what forges a profound and unshakable political consciousness. Before this point, a person may hold political opinions, but they are often academic or tribal. After this point, politics is understood in the marrow of one's bones. The eviction notice is not just a legal document. It is a verdict on your family's safety and future, a physical expression of a housing policy that prioritizes landlord profits over human dignity. The medical bill that plunges a family into debt is not just an invoice. It is a price tag placed on a life, a brutal reminder that the healthcare system is designed as a for-profit enterprise rather than a public good. This experience strips away the euphemisms and bureaucratic language that cloak the violence of bad policy. It reveals the human costs behind the legislative text. This is not an intellectual exercise. It is a moment of radical clarity where the machinery of governance is seen not as a benign administrator, but as an active agent in your suffering this painful personal collision with policy is often the seed of a deeper engagement, transforming apathy into anger and resignation into a resolve to fight back. Because the stakes are no longer about partisan victories, but about the very integrity and security of one's own life. The true power of a personal grievance is realized not in its solitary suffering, but in its shared discovery. This is the critical transition from private pain to public power. The moment when an individual's struggle ceases to be seen as a unique failure and is revealed as a common condition. When a person sits with their eviction notice, the dominant narrative imposed upon them is one of personal inadequacy. They did not work hard enough. They did not manage their money wisely. They alone have failed. This narrative is a tool of political control designed to isolate and disempower. Its effectiveness, however, crumbles upon the first conversation with a neighbor facing the same threat. The first community meeting where dozens of identical stories are voiced. The individual wound is recognized as a collective symptom. The problem is no longer located within the individual's choices, but is correctly identified in the system's design, in the speculator-driven housing market, the lack of tenant protections, and the political priorities that allow both to persist. This shared grievance dismantles the myth of individual failure and replaces it with the clarity of systemic injustice. This process of collectivization is the fundamental genesis of political solidarity and movement building. It transforms a collection of isolated, powerless individuals into a unified body with a common enemy and a shared demand. The energy that was once consumed by private shame and despair is redirected outward, becoming a potent force for collective action. The conversation shifts from what is wrong with me to what is wrong with a system that produces this suffering on a mass scale. And most importantly, what must we do to change it? This collective identity, forged in shared hardship, becomes the bedrock of mutual aid, organized protest, and political demand. It is the understanding that the landlord who threatens one tenant threatens the entire building's security. The policy that harms one family's ability to afford medicine endangers the health of the entire community. This solidarity is not merely sentimental. It is strategic. It is the practical recognition that our individual survival is inextricably linked and that our liberation from the crises imposed upon us can only be achieved through a united front. The personal, when pooled together, ceases to be a source of isolation and becomes the very engine of political power. The anger that arises from a personal encounter with an unjust political system is often portrayed as a destructive, chaotic force, something to be suppressed, managed, or apologized for. This perspective, however, misunderstands its fundamental nature. The fourth keynote reframes this anger not as a problem, but as a potential. It is the raw, emotional testimony that a profound wrong has been committed. It is the body's and the spirit's refusal to accept a harmful status quo. When policy becomes a personal wound, the resulting anger is a testament to a person's dignity, a signal that they recognize they deserve better than the hardship being imposed upon them. This anger is a generative energy, a form of political clarity that cuts through the fog of apathy and resignation. It is the vital fuel that can propel an individual out of the private, suffocating space of despair and into the public, collective arena of demand. The critical work of politics, then, is not to extinguish this anger, but to channel it. Left untended, it can indeed turn inward as depression or outward as unproductive rage. But when organized and given a collective purpose, it becomes the engine for tangible change. This is the process of transforming a reactive emotion into a proactive force. It means providing the structures, the tenant unions, the community organizations, the political campaigns that can harness this energy and direct it toward a strategic target. The anger over an eviction notice is no longer just a solitary feeling of outrage. It becomes the determination to pack a city council hearing and demand a vote on universal rent control. The fury over a medical bill is transformed into the disciplined effort to organize a phone bank for healthcare legislation. In this alchemy, private frustration is converted into public power. The anger ceases to be a fire that consumes the individual and becomes a forge that tempers collective resolve, building the strength and unity necessary to challenge and dismantle the systems that caused the pain in the first place. It is the indispensable catalyst for the journey from being a victim of politics to becoming its author. The journey from experiencing political harm to engaging in political action is at its core a process of reclaiming agency for those on the receiving end of a cruel policy, the eviction, the unpayable bill, the denied asylum claim. The overwhelming sensation is one of powerlessness. You are acted upon by forces far beyond your control, reduced to a case number, a statistic, or a problem to be managed. This state of being a subject where your life's conditions are dictated by the decisions of distant and unaccountable powers, is a profound form of political disenfranchisement. It is the feeling that your destiny is not your own. The fifth keynote identifies the act of organizing and fighting back as the direct antidote to this condition. When a tenant who received an eviction notice joins with their neighbors to form a union and confront their landlord, a fundamental shift occurs. They are no longer just a passive recipient of a verdict. They have become an active participant in a negotiation. They have moved from being an object of policy to being a subject who speaks back to power. This reclamation is not merely symbolic. It is a practical reordering of one's relationship to the world. The energy that was once consumed by anxiety and fear is redirected into the work of strategy, solidarity, and demand making. The individual learns that their voice, when combined with others, carries weight. They learn the mechanisms of power, how to file a grievance, how to get a law introduced, how to use the media, how to apply public pressure. This knowledge is itself a form of power. The process transforms a person from someone who feels they have no choice but to accept the world as it is given to them into someone who believes they have the capacity to change it. This is the essence of agency, the belief in one's own ability to act effectively upon the world. It is the understanding that while a single person may be powerless against a system, a collective of people organized and united by a shared purpose can force that system to bend. Therefore, the political struggle is not just about winning a specific policy concession, as vital as that may be. It is also about the transformative experience of the struggle itself, which forges a new identity for the participants, no longer victims but citizens, no longer subjects but architects of their own shared future. The ultimate purpose of making politics personal is not merely to win isolated policy battles or to secure a more equitable distribution of resources, as vital as those goals are. It is to achieve a more profound transformation, the establishment of a politics of care. This concept represents a fundamental reimagining of the role of government and collective action, shifting from a model of punitive management to one of active, nurturing support. A politics of care recognizes that the hardships we face, the inability to afford a home, the fear of medical debt, the struggle to find dignity in work, are not individual failures but shared responsibilities. It understands that our personal well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of our neighbors and the health of our community. Therefore, the policies born from this philosophy are not seen as handouts or burdens on the state, but as intelligent and moral investments in our collective capacity to thrive. This framework moves us beyond a transactional view of politics, where citizens make demands and governments dispense benefits, toward a relational one, where policy is the tangible expression of our interdependence. It asks not how much does this program cost, but what does it cost us as a society to allow our people to live in fear, in poverty, or in poor health? A politics of care builds systems that catch people before they fall. Rather than punishing them for having fallen, it designs a healthcare system that prioritizes healing over profit, a housing system that guarantees shelter as a human right, and an economy that measures its success not by corporate dividends, but by the dignity and security of every worker. This is the final and most powerful answer to the personal wounds inflicted by an uncaring system. It is the conscious creation of a social fabric so strong and so compassionate that the very crises that once radicalized individuals, the evictions, the bills, the exclusions, become increasingly rare. By making politics personal, we forge a society where the government is not a distant, cold authority, but a reflection of our best collective instinct to care for one another and ensure that no one is left to face alone the challenges that are, by their very nature, communal. So let us stop being told that our lives are not political. Let us stop accepting the lie that our struggles are private affairs. We have seen the truth that the political is personal, and the personal, when we come together, becomes powerfully political. This is our call to action. Let us carry the weight of our personal stories, not as hidden shames, but as our most compelling testimony. Let us channel our rightful anger into the disciplined work of building power. Let us transform our isolated fears into a unified demand for a world built on a foundation of care, dignity, and justice, a world where our systems support our lives rather than sabotage them. This work is not easy, but it is the most important work there is. It is the work of reclaiming our agency, our community, and our future. Thank you for your courage in sharing your stories. Thank you for your commitment to this collective struggle. Now, let us go forth from here not as a collection of isolated individuals, but as a movement. Good luck, stay strong, and let's get to work building the world we know is possible. Thank you.